talked about during the autopsy, photos were taken to document the injuries.
Yes.
Were photos also taken of examination done of the injuries?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I have what's been marked as States Exhibit 178, A to Q. Counsel was provided a copy today.
The series of photographs, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. It's a series of photographs taken during the autopsy. And I believe the witness has been handled that jump drive. I would move for the admission of States Exhibit 178, A to Q.
And there would be no objection by the defense to that exhibit, Judge.
Okay, so exhibit 178, A through Q, it's 178 is the exhibit, A through Q are individual photographs within the exhibit, and they're all admitted, Ms. Blake.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would ask to be handed that jump drive back. Your Honor, I will indicate these are graphic photos. I am going to be asking to publish them to the jury.
Very well. We'll have those published, and as I mentioned, we've had the monitors arranged so the public's not viewing those and they're not being streamed on the live stream.
Dr. Christensen, do you see that image on your monitor?
I do.
Can you tell us what we're observing here?
This is the bruise that's on her left chest.
And in this image?
This is a closer up image of the same injury.
And can you talk about, there's a little scale there. What is the purpose of putting that on the photo?
Just so we have a reference to the size of it when you get zoomed in, especially in a picture like this, it's sometimes you can't always tell exactly where you are or have a reference point to know what size something is. So we include a scale so we have a reference.
And in this photo, can you talk about what we're seeing?
This is an incision through that area of bruising.
And can you talk about why you did that in this particular case?
And with all of these, looking at the tissue, like I said, microscopically will give us some idea what they look like. So this is a prelude to having a sample to look at under the microscope. But it also confirms there are things, for example, certain dermatologic conditions and other things that can look like a bruise on the surface, but when you incise them, there's no evidence of hemorrhage in the tissue. So in this case, we can see that there is hemorrhage in the tissue.
And in this particular photo?
This is, again, a photo of the same area with the a tissue section removed that demonstrates the hemorrhage placed into what we call a cassette. That little white plastic thing is that tissue that is placed in there is then taken and processed and turned into a microscopic slide that I can review under the microscope.
Ms. Blake, on these, would you care to identify each by the sub-exhibit letter, if you don't mind?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
And the first one that was referenced of the chest is going to be 178A. The close-up of the chest is 178B. The first incision is 178C. And the most recent one that was referenced would be 178D with the slide showing an excision of the chest.
Thank you, Ms. Blake.
When you looked at this, what, if anything, did I think you used the term hemorrhage. What, if anything, did that tell you in relation to this bruise?
That it is a bruise. Just looking at it grossly doesn't necessarily tell us much, except that there is hemorrhage there. And then seeing it under the microscope gives us further information about that.
And then moving to 178E, can you? 178E, can you tell us what we're seeing in this photo?
Yes, this is an excision of tissue of the bruise of the left biceps.
And again, in those excisions, were you able to determine anything in relation to whether that was a bruise?
It was. Yes, there's hemorrhage within the subcutaneous fat. Normally, an excision of skin will just show a layer of normal pinkish tan skin on top, and all of the fat beneath it will be a bright yellow color, like is evident in most of those sections, but there are also darker areas indicative of hemorrhage.
And then on this slide, what are we seeing here?
This is a closer up image of the same injury and same excision.
And Your Honor, this is, we moved on to 178F.
All right.
This is 178G. Can you tell us what we're seeing in this image?
This is a photograph of the two bruises on the back of the right upper arm.
And moving to 178H, can you tell us what we're seeing in this image?
Yes, this image depicts the three bruises on the right biceps as well as two on the right forearm.
And there are some other markings there, it looks like, on the forearm in addition to those blue marks. Do you know what those marks were?
Yes, those are areas where mold had grown and we'd subsequently cleaned that off.
So those are not bruises.
They are not.
And then moving to 178J, can you tell us what we're seeing in this image?
This is a closer up image of the right biceps demonstrating the bruising there.
178K, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
Again, this is an excision of the tissue of the lower of the three injuries to the right biceps with the excised tissue in the cassette.
And what did that tell you when you did, when you took that excision?
Just shows us more hemorrhage in the tissues.
And did that indicate to you that those were in fact bruises?
Yes.
And 178L, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
I believe, actually, I'm not positive looking at it, whether that's the same as the last image.
And if I back up to the last image,
Yes.
if that has the letter B at the end on that white slide, does that help in reference?
Yes, this
And-
is just a close-up image of 178J, I believe, the immediately prior image.
And when we look at this one, it appears that there's more of that dark coloration. Can you explain what that would indicate?
It's just that there's hemorrhage in a larger area of tissue.
Would that be indicative of a larger bruise or a deeper bruise, or could you tell?
I mean, it's clearly both deeper and larger in terms of the area that's damaged.
And moving on to 178M. Oops. Get back to the right image here. Looking at 178M, what are we seeing here?
It's labeled L on my screen. I believe. It's the right forearm with two bruises.
And going to the next one here, what are we seeing in this image?
This one is labeled M and is a closer up image of those two areas of bruising.
And those are again on the right forearm.
Yes.
And then moving to 178N, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
This is an excision through one of those two bruises on the right forearm.
And what, if anything, did this excision tell you?
Again, it confirms that it's a bruise, that there is hemorrhage in the skin and soft tissue.
And then moving to 178P,
This is an image of a bruise on the anterior forearm, right forearm.
And then moving to 178Q.
Again, a closer up image of that same bruise on the anterior right forearm.
And 178. Oh, this is marked as 178. Oh, can you tell what we're looking at here?
Yes, this is the right forearm with an excision through that area of bruising.
And that was on the front of the forearm.
Yes.
And Dr. Christensen, were you able to make any kind of a determination as to when in time those bruises may have occurred?
They all showed evidence of hemorrhage in the tissue with no evidence of any sort of inflammatory response or cleanup response. So they would have occurred sometime from minutes to hours prior to her death.
And I think you indicated, but these would have occurred prior to her death. Is that correct?
Most likely. You certainly can bruise a deceased body, but generally speaking, that's not going to occur for a very protracted period of time once circulation stops. Mostly the types of blunt injuries that we see in people that have already passed are more things like lacerations, where a body might be dropped or something of that nature, but it certainly could have happened right around the time of death.